Well, after last week's detour, we are thrown back into the main story where more answers are revealed and David's quest for control starts to come to an end. Hey guys, remember Legion, Season 1, Episode 7, Chapter 7. I was definitely looking forward to this episode, especially after last week's, which last week's, like I said, was very confusing. I didn't really know what was going on. I thought it was still a great episode. I'd say it probably was my least favorite of the season just because of how weird it really was, but I also loved the episode, and it's not really that big of a deal to say I have a least favorite because every episode of the season has been fantastic. There hasn't been a single episode I haven't liked, and this episode, I thought, was another great episode. I really did love this episode overall. We got a lot more answers in this episode. We got some really cool stuff going on with David here. And, of course, we had another just stunning sequence towards the end of this episode. But let's just get into it because there definitely is a lot to talk about. We only have 2 episodes left, which is insane. I can't believe next week is the finale. This season has just gone by way too fast. But let's just get into it. So, we start at clockwork, the lights in the hallways burn out, Carrie runs down the hallway gasping for breath as Walter strolls after her whistling, and we then see people appear in the hallway clawing at Carrie and then disappear, so she finally hides and Walter walks past her, and the devil / Lenny is then questioning Amy, asking what he did with it, and Lenny asks her about the day that David came to live with her and the man who brought her, and she insists that Amy remember even though she was 4 at the time, which is crazy to think about. I mean, obviously, this is something that's kind of hard for her to remember, but Amy describes how she snuck out onto the landing to listen in. She thought it was just a dream, and Amy wonders why the devil is demanding answers, and Lenny points out a monitor showing Oliver's ice cell, and basically if she doesn't give her answers, she's going to make sure that Oliver stays there, and here's my one complaint with this episode. Again, I've said it before, Amy as a character, I'm just not that compelled to. They haven't shown enough with her. They've had a few interesting things with her. I think the actress is fine. It's nothing about that. It's just because everything else is so interesting. Amy's story just does not hold a candle to everything else going on. I just don't find it as interesting as, are their stories going on. I think everyone else is a lot more interesting than Amy, and because of that, her story just doesn't hold a lot of weight, and it doesn't really feel like they know exactly what to do with her yet, and maybe that'll change in the finale, but this season, she just really hasn't shown me much, so her scenes, I like them, I think they're good, I think Aubrey Plaza's fantastic, she's really, I think, dominating the show right now, definitely her and Dan Stevens are, like, the 2 big performances, but as a whole, Amy as a character just isn't really doing much for me, but in the ice cell, Oliver brings Carrie in and pours drinks, and we get a lot of exposition here, but it's definitely important exposition, because Carrie hugs him saying that Oliver hasn't aged an hour, and he casually mentions Melanie, and Oliver actually, we find out, doesn't remember his wife, which is crazy to think about, but he misses he's been there such a long time, his memory is vague. Remember, the longer that you're there, the more your memory starts to fade away, and that's something that's happening to Oliver, he's starting to lose some of those memories, and he explains that the devil is a parasite that has attached itself to David's consciousness, and they should rescue Carrie's friends, and Oliver assures Carrie that the devil can't find them, and says that he and David are starting a barbershop quartet. He figures that Carrie knows who the devil is, who is Amal Farouk. Now, Farouk is putting all of his energy into tricking David, and Carrie realizes that Farouk has disguised himself as the Shadow King, and Oliver warns that Farouk has locked David's consciousness away, and soon will disappear entirely, and basically that's the mission they have here. They need to be as, they need to be as efficient as possible with trying to save David's memory, because they don't have much time left, and Farouk is going to essentially become David, and he reveals an image of the team's bodies in the real world, seconds from being shot down, and what's great about this thing is that it answers a lot of questions for last week, what actually was going on. Yes, they were basically in stasis the whole time, they have been in that room, that is the real reality of what's going on. The reality is that David only has a few more hours left before his brain, the devil completely takes over, and we definitely see it throughout this episode, and that's definitely one of the best parts of this episode, just seeing David slowly lose it. I love the way they've done that this season. I think just giving us that answer of what's really going on really heightens the stakes, and like I said, really does give us a lot more insight into what's going on, which this show doesn't do a lot of, and I was happy to see they at least gave us some answers as to what's going on. So David then appears inside the ice wall. He's screaming, and Carrie explains that he made a halo that fires random electromagnetic singles, and if they put it on David in the frozen timeline, should block Farouk and break the Clockwork's fantasy. Because obviously, he knows it's not real. He knows this is just some sort of, creation that David has made to kind of, or David or the Shadow King. We don't really know at this point. I'm assuming Farouk was the one who had to do it, but Farouk is the one who basically created this to distract them from what's going on. But Oliver points out that then they'll be in their real bodies and shot with bullets, and basically it's going to go bad either way. If they're in this hallucination, it's going to distract them from what's going on. The second they wake up, they're about to be shot. So really, this is not working out, and Carrie says that they'll need everyone in to change the dynamics of the room and block the bullets, and in response, Oliver introduces Carrie to his suit named Jules Verne, which that was really cool. I love that we now know what's going on, though, because now we know what that whole thing had to do with Carrie in that suit, because I didn't understand what was going on there. Now we know. And we go back to where last week's episode left off, where a suited Carrie goes to where Sid is sleeping, removes her headphones, and she wakes up and Carrie motions her out. He leads her to an isolation chamber and assures Sid that Farouk can't hear them, and Sid has already worked out what's going on. She knows that this is just, that this was just a mind palace and that it wasn't actually real, and she figures that they have to distract Farouk so that they can save their bodies without Farouk knowing. Sid will go to the hospital and get the others while Carrie fixes the device. So he gives her a pair of glasses that Oliver made to help them. They will show Sid what's real and what isn't, and there are more glasses for the others, and Carrie tells her they'll send a signal when he's in place. So at this point, they're doing whatever they can to try to save him, and Sid then returns to the Clockwork's fantasy. She finds it in chaos. She puts on the glasses. The people disappear, we find out. So the people weren't actually there. It was completely fake. And she goes to find David. And David then pounds on the sides of his coffin. He's screaming. A lot of this episode, he's inside this coffin. And definitely, like I said, the first 15 minutes or so, there was a lot of exposition given. But I think it was definitely necessary exposition. Melanie fails to move the bullets or Sid. She sees a suited figure in the mirror, and it's Carrie. He steps out of the mirror while Oliver appears in the room as well and introduces himself to Melanie. He still doesn't remember that she's his wife, and it's really sad, honestly. He doesn't remember that, but he finds her familiar. He knows that definitely she's something. She definitely has some sort of significance in his life. He just doesn't know yet, and I think that's going to be a big part of Season 2. At least I'm assuming. I think Oliver's going to play a much larger role in Season 2, knowing how talented Jermaine Clement is. Like I said, they're not going to let an actor of that caliber go unnoticed. They're going to give him as much as they can. I think definitely next season he's going to have a lot more to do. I could be wrong, but I think at least that's the direction I think we're going in. But basically, Carrie finds a halo device in his real body's hand. While Melanie goes out in the hallway, she finds a drop of blood dripping up. There's a puddle of blood on the floor. More drops flow upward to the ceiling. And moving on, Melanie finds Rudy in a closet, a knife in his chest, and Rudy supposedly is dead. And we get this really horrific flashback where the Orleys actually shave the comatose Rudy and, they wheel him to the common room, and basically, Rudy hasn't been a huge character, but he plays a big role in this episode, and I actually like the way they did that. You definitely do care for him here. So, Sid continues searching for the others. She finds Rudy in his wheelchair. Meanwhile, Carrie runs in. She bars the door, kicks at the other patients coming at her until Sid puts on a pair of glasses on her and motions her to be silent. Walter really exists, and he actually tries to get through the barred door. Now, that was surprising. I didn't think that Walter was actually there, but yeah, Walter is actually there, surprisingly, which I was quite surprised with. So Lenny then stands in her office. She's looking out the window, and David's trying to get a control of himself, pointing out that he's in a mental coffin rather than a real one. And we then get one of the coolest scenes with David so far, where we basically get Rational Mind David, who is essentially Dan Stevens' real voice, which this is definitely one of the hardest things Dan Stevens has to do. He has to go back and forth between his real accent and his fake one, and it is incredible what he has to do here. He appears, he reminds David that Farouk tricked him into giving up control. His other self explains that David's power created him to save David because he's breaking down. And David points out that they're underground, a locked coffin, and Rational Mind David notes that they don't have a body, so they can't be underground. And he then has David visualize a classroom and a blackboard, and it appears. And Rational Mind David is basically there to get David to understand what the fuck is going on, because David hasn't known all season, and Rational Mind David says that David knows everything Farouk knows and has him write everything out, and he reminds David that Lenny said that Farouk knew David's father, and David works that Farouk is immune like him, that has been his mind ever since he was a baby. It's always been there, it's always been a part of him, so this is not something that's new. We've known this for a while, but this is stuff that David has to relearn. So, drawing on the chalkboard, David figures that his biological father was immune like him, Farouk was his enemy, enemy, and they fought mentally on the astral planet. David figures that his father won, but Farouk's mind entered David, and David's parents decided to give him away to keep David safe, obviously. Now that makes sense, because obviously they knew Farouk was very dangerous, they knew Farouk would probably overtake David, so they did what they could to keep him safe, to get Farouk away. But Farouk possessed him to get revenge, we find out, and Farouk made David crazy, and basically fed on him to gain power and get revenge, and that's what made David go crazy. It really was Farouk that was doing it, and that's something that we really have been questioning, I think, in this second half of the season, because the first 4 episodes, like, oh yeah, he's not crazy, but there's been quite a few things in these last 2 that have suggested that that might not be the case, and here we see that was basically Farouk's doing. He was the one who made him crazy, he did it to get revenge, and when Sid came, Farouk realized that he just couldn't hide anymore. He needed to make his presence known, because again, he couldn't have David engage in any sort of contact with this girl. He wouldn't let David have that agency. He wanted to do that on his own. He wanted to take over, and you can understand why. So Rashomon David warns that their bodies are in their childhood home, and they're also in trouble. And David realizes that Melanie was wrong and he was sick, but he's not sick anymore. And Rashomon David asks what he's going to do about it. David says he's going to get his body back, and he reappears back in the coffin and starts freeing himself. And it's such a triumphant moment. Finally seeing David take advantage, finally seeing him actually being able to do something for himself, which you really have not seen yet in the show. This is him getting, doing what he can to try to get rid of Farouk and eradicate him. It's incredible to watch. I love the way that scene was done. It's one of Dan Stevens' best scenes on the show so far. It really does show how great the show is with like mind stuff and things like that. It was such a mindfuck of a scene, but it was so well done. It finally got David to wake up and realize what he really needed to do, and like I said, that stuff right there is perfectly going to lead us into next week's finale. So Sid and Carrie take Rudy down the empty hallway. Carrie and Melanie then try to move David and Sid's bodies without success, and then Oliver starts up a stream of music, and what follows is essentially a silent film, and this was incredible. I don't know how they come up with this idea, but there's just something so eerie about the idea of not being able to talk and not knowing dialogue, and to hear it through something like a silent film was incredible. I love the way this was done. David breaks out of the coffin, he wanders through the astral planet. Sid and the others continue searching for David. Walter tackles Carrie, knocking off her glasses. She fights off the patient. Sid turns, sees her teammates fighting thin air. Walter hits her, and Sid attacks him, trying to pull Carrie away. David goes in circles in a maze of hallways, and Lenny arrives, greets Sid and Carrie as they struggle with Walter. They ignore her, and Lenny tells Walter that he can go. She compresses him into a ball, and Melanie and Carrie then stare at Walter. He dies in the real world. So yeah, Walter's dead, and honestly, I was satisfied with the way he died. I mean, we got basically most of his backstory last week. We understood what he was really trying to do, that he was someone who was made fun of and things like that, and that he really was kind of trying to help David, but he just really couldn't do much. In the end, the devil ended up winning. He tried to do what he could to, try to help out David, but it just didn't work to no avail, and Lenny advances on Sid and Carrie. Carrie puts the halo on. Lenny sees him. She tells Sid and Carrie that she'll be back in a second. So David concentrates. He tries to shatter the hallways, and Lenny then appears in the real world, telekinetically shoves Oliver into a wall. She then returns to the Clockworks fantasy, prepares to kill them. The hallways shatter around David. Rudy ends up waking up as this happens, and the bullets continue on towards Sid and David. Carrie puts the halo on David's head, realizing that this is the only way he can sort of control him, and Rudy is able to grab Lenny. She throws them both down the hallway. The fantasy shatters, and the fantasy Carrie merges with his real body. David spins Sid around and catches the bullets in his hand. Walter compressed into a ball. Amy gasps in horror and shock, and that's how this part of the sequence ends, which that was just incredible. The way this whole sequence was done, I mean, it's just so meticulously crafted, the way they were able to do this. There's not much dialogue going on. It's just a lot of music and black and white, and it felt like you were watching a silent movie. I don't know how they're able to do it, and how they're able to change it up every single week, where every episode feels like something different, but they really did do it here. I didn't think they'd be able to top the sequence in Chapter 5, where it was completely devoid of sound, but this really did. I think they did an incredible job with this here. I really did love the way this was done. The show really knows how to play into the idea of fear, and especially when it comes to the idea of no sound, that's something that we're used to hearing in horror films, that, in horror films we're always afraid that, oh, there's no sound, something scary is going to happen. Well, here there wasn't just, no sound. There literally was no sound. There was no dialogue. It was just really cool to see them fight, completely devoid of, color or anything like that. I thought it was really cool the way it was done. It really represented the bleakness of what was going on, and I really do love the way this sequence captured. This is something that Legion just knows how to do better than any other show on TV. Like I said, it's entirely Noah Hawley's vision. It's exactly what he wants them to do, and that's something that's really worked throughout this entire show. Our sequences like this really are going to help the show stand out, and that's one of the reasons why the show, I think, is as great as it is. So the team returns to Summerlin, carrying the injured Rudy. Carrie then stops David from removing the halo and explains that they isolated Farouk in his mind to keep Farouk trapped. That way they can let David, stand out on his own, because they know he doesn't have much time left. So David has to continue wearing the halo to keep him trapped, and Melanie goes to the chamber where Oliver's body is. She opens the helmet, discovers that there's no one inside, and basically there's no one there. That was definitely really weird. But she walks to the cafeteria, finds Oliver serving eggs to the others, and he gives Melanie a sunflower and some eggs. So while Carrie watched from the doorway, which is kind of devastating to watch, honestly, again, that Oliver, he knows that he definitely had some connection to Melanie, but we don't know really what that's all about. So Carrie watched from the doorway. Carrie comes over. His sister says that she's good. And Carrie finally says that she needed him, and he left her and walks away. And remember, they were trying to find, excuse me, they were trying to find that balance together, and I like that she said, I need you, I can't do it on my own. She thought she could, but she realized that she needed him, and it was a really triumphant scene. I like the way it was done. Definitely was very satisfying, and David goes to help Amy get coffee in the machine. She apologized for not telling the truth about David being adopted and the man. He warns her that she can't contact Ben because D3 is watching. As David goes to join Sid and Carrie, he sees the angry boy and warns him that Farouk isn't too happy. They should get the Shadow King out of his mind, and they take David to Carrie's lab. So Oliver offers to tell Melanie the story of the lady and the crane, which we know we've heard the story before. This was back in chapter 4 when she was told this story. So we're about to see how this about, and right when this is about to come to fruition, we see a bunch of Division 3 soldiers arrive. They capture all of them. The interrogator walks up. He's covered in third-degree burns and obviously from that fire that took place, but he tells David that they have a lot to talk about. He orders the soldiers to kill the others, and basically they're about to all die. So deep within David's mind, Farouk pounds on the wall of the coffin, cracks it open, showing that there is definitely a way for Farouk to escape out of David's mind and to manifest somehow. And that is the way this episode ends. Really incredible stuff overall, but let's just get into this episode and where this is going to lead us into the finale. So once again, guys, another really incredible episode. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. Let's first talk about Farouk, because to Carrie's knowledge, this halo is keeping Farouk from going into David's mind. It's letting David have this control. As we see, that's not the case. Farouk still has a lot of control. Farouk is going to do what it can to populate David, to overtake David's mind and basically, manifest completely, which is obviously the fear of what's going to happen. But now, I don't know what's going to happen here, because clearly the halo didn't work, so I don't know if that's, what's actually going to go down here, if this is actually going to work out for them, if Farouk is going to get the better of them in the end. I don't really know what's going to happen, and that's something I like. I like that uncertainty. I like that I don't really know what's going to happen regarding the finale. I think it definitely is very interesting. But I'm glad that the Interrogator's back, because the Interrogator was a big part that started this show. We saw from the beginning that this guy wasn't just some officer. He was definitely part of Division 3, and we still don't know a lot about that specific unit. We know, obviously, that they kept David there and things like that, and that David had this, a very hostile type, relationship with Dr. Kissinger, but other than that, we don't know much about Division 3, and I think we're going to find out more about what's going on there, what happened to the Interrogator, things like that. I think that definitely is going to be interesting to see what ends up going down there. So we'll have see what ends up happening with Division 3. And especially Amy, she knows that Division 3 is watching. I think Ben could possibly be a part of it. I think that Ben is definitely a part of Division 3. So I'm interested in seeing really where that's going to factor into this. I think that whole thing is going to be very interesting. The whole thing going on with Oliver is just really sad. I really did feel bad for Melanie throughout this episode. She really wants Oliver to be there. She wishes that he would remember who she is, but unfortunately he's just not, and it's really sad to see. You can tell that Oliver, he does know that him and Melanie had some sort of a relationship at some point, but he just doesn't know the full details. What was this relationship? How long did it go? He doesn't know the who, what, when, the why, and the where. He just knows the who. That's it. He just knows that, and Like I said, I think it's going to be a big part of Season 2. Maybe that'll be solved next week. I have no idea, but I think most likely that's going to be a big part of Season 2. But we'll have to see. As far as Carrie and Carrie, I thought there was some really satisfying stuff there with them realizing they can rely on each other and that they really do need each other. Thought that was definitely very well done. I thought they did some really good stuff, regarding that. I thought that was all very impressive. Like I said, the silent film sequence really was the highlight of this episode. I just loved everything about that. I think the fight choreography was incredible. The cinematography was great. The way it stayed in black and white and looked like an old movie and tried to make you feel like you were watching a silent movie was incredible. I love the way that was handled. And then the Rational Mind David scene. I mean, that was also really well done. Very hard stuff for Dan Stevens to do, but it really does show, how hard he works in the show. I mean, I said Rami Malek is the greatest actor on TV. Dan Stevens is quickly becoming a rival to that, because he definitely is projecting so much into this role. He's pouring so much into it, especially in that specific scene. I mean, there's so much you have to do in just that one scene. It's crazy to do, just that. It's crazy to go back and forth between those two personas, but Dan Stevens honestly nailed it. He did a great job with nailing those two, never cracking once, never feeling like, oh, that sounds too much like David, that sounds too much like Rational Mind David. He stayed in those two characters, and I love the way that was handled. I think it was incredibly well done. Really good stuff there. My only real complaint with this episode, if I really had to have one, had to be Amy. Like I said, I just don't really have much, I'm just not really that compelled to her character. As much as I care about her and David's relationship, that's really what I care about. I care about his relationship to Amy and the secret she told him. Sure, I care about that. But I just don't care about her as a character. They haven't done enough with her. They haven't given her enough in the show. I just didn't really care as much about Amy as the show wants me to. Maybe they'll give me more next week. It just, right now, she is my least favorite character in the show. I just don't really have much, to care. They're not really showing me a ton with her. There's stuff with her, definitely, like her and Ben. I think definitely it's going to be interesting to see where she ends up going there. And the fact that she, her entire life thought that David was crazy, and now she's realizing he isn't. I just don't think the show has dived enough into it. And I understand why, obviously. There hasn't been time for it. We need to focus on David and things like that. I'm hoping they do take the time, either the finale or next season to develop Amy eventually. But right now, I'm just not that compelled her as a character. Other than that, guys, this episode was fucking amazing as usual. I really did love this episode. You guys know how much I love this show. This show is yet to give a bad episode. I don't think there's going to be a bad episode of the show. I can't believe next week is the finale, but there's so much that can happen in next week's finale. Honestly, there are just so many places we can go. I don't even want to try to predict, because there's literally so many different things that can happen, and I'm usually wrong most of the time anyway, so I really don't want to try to predict what's going on here. But overall, guys, I really did love this episode overall. I think there were some incredible things going on here. A lot of exposition, definitely in the first half, but I think the second half definitely did make up for it. And I'm definitely going to give Legion Season 1, Episode 7, Chapter 7, a 4.5 out of 5, or an A-. So for guys, for this episode of Legion, let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. Loved your thoughts on it. What do you think of the silent film sequence? Are you looking forward to next week's finale? Do you have any predictions for next week? Honestly, again, I don't want to try to predict because I'm probably going to be wrong anyway. But that's my review. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be, I think, for a movie review. I'm not entirely sure. It'll be for that or for Iron Fist. Yes, I am still reviewing that show. Like I said, I'm going to be sporadic with it. I've been very sporadic. I have not reviewed an episode since Friday. It's going to stay that way. And we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.